So this is a really good question, and I would love to answer it because I have a couple of things to say. And I forgot to say just a quick disclaimer that none of this is medical advice. I am not a doctor. I am a success story of naltrexone following the Sinclair Method, and I've been a coach to countless people over the last 6 years. So first of all, the Sinclair Method is kind of the nickname this treatment was given, named after the scientist who discovered it, Dr. David Sinclair. Originally, it was called pharmacological extinction of the alcohol addiction.
Lucas said that you were interested in what other people are calling the Sinclair Method for treating alcoholism. I call it extinction or pharmacological extinction.
Because essentially what's happening when somebody goes on this treatment protocol by taking naltrexone 1 hour before drinking repeatedly over many, many months, what happens is the addiction essentially becomes extinguished or extinct in the brain, meaning the brain essentially unlearns the alcohol addiction over time. So the Sinclair Method terminology and pharmacological extinction are kind of one and the same thing, but again, it got given that name after the researcher and scientist who discovered it. Another thing that is unique to the Sinclair Method is the discovery of the alcohol deprivation effect, which was a cornerstone of David Sinclair's research, which essentially showed that when someone is addicted to alcohol and they quit drinking, what happens is their brain actually goes into a deprivation mode. And when we're deprived of anything, we can think about, if you haven't had water and you're really, really thirsty, you're deprived of water, what happens is you often, the craving for it increases and you want it more. And when you finally get some water, you end up binge drinking it. And something similar happens when someone has an alcohol addiction because the addiction is impacting the survival part of the brain. And so when somebody goes abstinent and quits drinking, what happens is their craving and motivation for a drink actually increases. And so a lot of people will talk about how they're just fighting cravings, and that leads to a lot of people relapsing. In fact, if you look at the data, 80% or more of people who go through traditional abstinence-based treatment programs will relapse within 6 months. So the alcohol deprivation effect was definitely an important part of David Sinclair's research to kind of show that, hey, we've been doing abstinence-based treatments for, almost 100 years now. And if you look at the data, it's not super effective for a lot of people. And it's probably due to, at least in part, this alcohol deprivation effect. And with targeted naltrexone therapy or the Sinclair Method, because people are still drinking and they're drinking on the medication naltrexone, it helps their brain to unlearn the addiction. It essentially reverses the addiction in the brain, and that completely avoids having to experience the alcohol deprivation effect. Another important part of David Sinclair's research, and actually everything I'm talking about can be found in this book here, The Cure for Alcoholism by Dr. Roy Escapa. But another important part of it is something called pharmacological enhanced learning, where essentially, if someone's on naltrexone, like in my case, I started this treatment as a daily drinker. So I was drinking every day and taking naltrexone every day, an hour before drinking. And with pharmacological enhanced learning, what happens is, the longer someone is on the treatment, they're not going to be taking naltrexone every day. And so they're not going to be blocking their opioid receptors in their brain. And so what happens with this treatment is we try to work with people strategically on their alcohol-free days, because there's this window of time, about 24 to 48 hours, when the naltrexone is out of the system and someone's not taking it and they're not drinking, where the receptors that were just blocked are essentially super sensitized and they're upregulated. And so during that period of time, the brain is kind of ripe for learning new pleasures, new activities, new hobbies, because the receptors that receive these pleasures and are able to essentially over time change habits and things like that are super sensitized. And so during this window of time, someone's on the treatment longer and longer, they're having more regular alcohol-free days. We try to encourage them on those alcohol-free days to do really pleasurable activities, hobbies, things like that, so that they can take advantage of that window of time where their brain is kind of ripe for learning new patterns and behaviors. And one other thing I'll say as well is, naltrexone's been approved for alcohol for decades by the FDA. And so when people learn about this medication and they go and ask their doctor for it, if the doctor's not familiar with the Sinclair Method, oftentimes the doctor will just say, okay, take this medicine once a day. And people will be oftentimes instructed to take it in the morning or at night before bed. And with the Sinclair Method, and what David Sinclair showed is that it really matters when the medication is taken, because because people want to have the peak levels of the medicine in their system when they're drinking, so they're getting the full effects of it. If someone, for example, is taking it in the morning and they're drinking in the evening, they've basically metabolized the majority of the medication, and so they're not getting the effects of it. And so I get emails from people all of the time who say, you know, I went on naltrexone 3 months ago and I've been taking it every day, but I'm not really seeing any difference in my drinking. And typically, one of the things I ask them is, well, when are you taking it? And so that's another kind of key thing that, you know, makes the Sinclair method unique, is that it's just, you know, the significance of taking the medication in that targeted dose 1 to 2 hours before drinking, because it really does matter when someone is taking the medication for it to be effective. And again, if your doctor's prescribing and they're kind of looking up the prescribing instructions, it will say just to take it once daily. And so if someone doesn't know about the targeted use of the medication and they want to, you know, reduce their drinking, again, it's really important when the medication is taken. Now, I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice. I just have my own personal experience from it and have been a coach to probably over 1,000 people by now and just seen this type of experience over and over again. So again, the Sinclair method is really another term for pharmacological extinction of the alcohol addiction, named after the scientist who discovered it. It also focused on, you know, the research behind the alcohol deprivation effect and why it's so hard for so many people to just quit drinking and remain abstinent, again, because their brain goes into deprivation mode. And then also there's the phenomenon of pharmacological enhanced learning, whereby someone doesn't have the naltrexone in their system, so their receptors are unblocked, and the brain is essentially ripe for learning new habits and behaviors. So I would say that there is a lot more to the Sinclair method than just simply taking a pill before drinking. It really is a holistic treatment program, you know, when done correctly, that essentially helps someone regain their control back over alcohol without having to go abstinent, without having to detox, without having to call themselves an alcoholic, or without having to have a belief that, you know, they have a disease and they're stuck this way for the rest of their life. A lot of people who go on this treatment really, by the end of it, feel like they are completely cured of the addiction and they can just move on with their life, whether they are still drinking with control and in moderation, or they end up going alcohol free. And in my view, as a success story of this treatment, it's almost like it has gained like a cult-like following in some way, because it's so revolutionary. Even 30 years later now, since it's been researched, it's still so unknown, but it's such a revolutionary treatment for people who have alcohol addiction, because it goes against everything we have believed for the better part of the last 100 years of what it means to, you know, fully recover from addiction, whereby, you know, people have to be abstinent, they have to go to AA, they have to go to rehab, they have to detox, they can never touch alcohol again, they have to call themselves an alcoholic. All of that is just completely challenged with the Sinclair method, and none of it is part of this treatment. So I think people like me who go on it and get free from alcohol addiction through this treatment, we become really excited about it, and a lot of us have respect and just reverence for David Sinclair and his discovery of this specific treatment. Because it's changing and saving lives. I hope that answers your question. You can learn more about the treatment with my other videos or the link in my profile, where we have a private online program that is totally centered around this unique, life-changing treatment. Thanks for watching.